Okay, I just want to kind of quickly show you just a couple things. Some of this is we've gone over, so I'm going to go over those slides really fast, but show you the results of what would happen if climate continues to change. Now, this is the area near our coastline. Here's Ventura, Oxnard Plain, Port Hueneme Naval Base, here's Point Mugu Navy Base. And so here's what happens. You can actually go here, sea level rise viewer, and do this on your own. And it's kind of interesting to see. You can, you know, put in a variable. So here's what happens if the ocean goes up 1 foot. Here's if it goes up 6 feet. So it gives you some idea of of how much land is going to be lost there, for example. The Maldive Islands in the Indian Ocean here, again, these islands that have very, very low elevation, kind of coral atolls, but big tourist destinations. And you can see here how what they've done to try and stop this, meaning you can see they built these walls around here and around here to try and mitigate the damage that will be done by rising sea levels. You know, to keep their country intact. This is kind of interesting. So here's if the temperature is 44 degrees. Here's what happens if it goes up to 55 degrees. The glaciers totally disappear. And that all goes into the oceans, adds more water into the oceans, which increases, the heat energy, more evaporation, and then thus more water vapor in the atmosphere. These we've already seen, based on the wobble of the Earth, the tilt, and the precession, and so forth. Sunset cycles. I just want to, get to some evidence and some predictions where we can look at things that have happened. So all these are measurements that show that that temperatures are indeed going up. Remember, I mentioned the Vikings. Again, when the water warmed up and there was less ice, the Vikings traveled from Norway to Scotland to Iceland over to Greenland and probably down into North America because it was warmer, so there was less ice. But then what happened was maybe 6,000 Vikings were over here, but then when the water got cold again and froze, they were trapped and they couldn't get back, and no people could get to them, so the settlements just died off. But you can still see the evidence of them. And tree rings we talked about already. Ocean core sediments, again, another way to look at evidence of past climates. And pollen, again, blows and sinks down into lakes and ponds. You can really pour down there. And again, it's a way to study past climates like that. And again, you can look at the distribution of what we call spruce forests by looking at the remnants of trees. So we know that 12,000 years ago, the spruce forests were here, which is indicative of warmer temperatures. And then, given current day, the spruce levels, only extend down into southern Canada. So this would have been glaciated. Now that it's not, tree levels are back here. Again, ice core samples, again, you can study those. That's what they look like. And many schools offer, San Diego State, for example, does work down in Antarctica. UCSB does this kind of study as well. Again, there's your glaciation periods. It's from the book. There's pollen that you can study. It gives you some idea of the oxygen content. So glaciation, we tend to think of it only in the north, but it was actually in the southern hemisphere as well. Deserts, tropics. Notice that some of what we now know as the Sahara Desert used to be a tropic. And there's lots of water underneath there that countries such as Algeria, Libya, for example, are drilling down to mine the groundwater. It just gives you some idea of the temperature range over the Earth's history and mean estimates based on the data. Again, just showing that temperatures are increasing. CO2 is going up. That's a Keeling curve. We know that. CO2 in the atmosphere. Again, we saw that. ice core data, same thing, shows you the CO2 concentration. Yeah, notice how it varies over different years, different periods. And notice that as population increases, this is the more humans, the more potential for human-induced climate change. We have to burn more fossil fuel and more industry and so forth. So in 2014, the global CO2 emissions, fossil fuel combustion, and so China, United States, the big ones behind this. And in terms of per capita CO2 production, U.S. is Canada are the largest, followed by Russia, and notice China's way down here. But again, as we're one of the most industrialized nations, if not the most industrialized nation in the world, so our CO2 production is very high. Here's Antarctica, and notice, here's what we're going to be looking at over here. Or is that right? Yeah, I'm sorry, right here, the Ross Ice Shelf. So here it is in January 31st, 2002, February 23rd, and then March 5th. So this whole big part of the ice shelf has disappeared, again, because of warmer water. The extent of the Arctic ice, 1979 to 2005. So now we have a true Northwest Passage where ships can actually sail through here. Here's Lyell Glacier in 1901. Here it is, same view, 2011. So notice that it's almost all gone over here and almost disappeared over here. Sea level change, again, this is in inches, not feet, but here's the base. So, in the last 100 years, we've gone up almost a foot, about 10 inches. This affects acidification in the oceans, affects coral, which affects plankton and so forth. So all these things contribute to, we saw that earlier. So predicted, so as this melts, and when it looks in the ground turns, so just a 10-degree difference in temperature would destroy the glaciers. That runs off into the ocean, and we get more sea level change. So different models have different predictive elevations, but 80 centimeters is about 40 inches. So if it goes up 3 feet, 1 meter, everything in red is covered up. It's a closer view, but a lot of Long Island, parts of New York City there, for example, most of the East Coast is going to see dramatic flooding. Then if it's down in Louisiana, New Orleans would pretty much be underwater. Almost all of this part of the Gulf Coast, for example, would be lost. And then again, 3 foot here in our area. So you can do this. Go to the sea level rise viewer yourself, and you can check this out. But anyways, I just want to give you some idea of what could happen in terms of climate change and how that will affect things like sea level rise. And you can look at that and